Anyway, I just want to say thank you to you and to Roshi Joan and to Upaya for inviting me, and to all of you for appearing today, coming to this event. I don't take it for granted. Your attention, the moments of your life are the most precious thing that there is on earth. So that you would come today and for this day give your attention to me and to the Dharma is a great thing. And as I say, I don't take it for granted. And I'm making a prayer right now that I can do my best to make this time of yours worthwhile. So thank you for being here. And right now, as I'm speaking, I'm seeing dear Monica Winkelmann on the screen, which reminds me of those horrible floods in her country, in Germany. Maybe there are other people from Germany on the screen here, and our heart goes out to everybody in Germany for that shocking event. I was talking to my son about it, and he said that when it floods in Houston, which it does flood in Houston, it's not so surprising because Houston is not that old a city, and maybe that when they built Houston, they didn't understand about how water moves. But in Germany, this city that flooded is a medieval city, so it's been there for many, 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 many hundreds of years. And so, if water floods that city, it means that this is not a normal condition. This is caused by our planetary changes. So it's very scary, and lots of lives were lost. So we're really, really sorry about that. Well, this morning, uh, um, I would like to start with some sitting. We have 3 hours this morning. Maybe we'll need a break somewhere along the way or not. But since we have 3 hours, we can start with some sitting, just silent sitting for about 25 minutes. So I have my little meditation bell here, and I'll ring the bell, and let's sit together and tune our hearts together. So just to remind you at the beginning of our sit, to return awareness to the body, to that flow of experiences that we refer to as the body. Very gently feeling the feet and the calves and the knees and the thighs and the hips and spine, arms and fingers, shoulders, neck, head, cheeks, jaw. These names we have for different kinds of experiences. And just marvel for a moment at how when we return awareness to the body, there's a immediate sense of stillness, a stillness that's always there. If only we would return our awareness to the body and let go of our thinking and our scheming and our curiosity and our worries, and just be present with the body. There will be stillness. And then within that stillness, to begin to appreciate the breathing. Just notice the breathing that's already going on, has always been going on. And see how pleasant is the breath. Breathing in, breathing out. Just like the ocean, moving in, moving out. So the breath moves in, moves out. And just like floating on the ocean, we can float on the breath. And we don't need to hold any of this too tightly. We want to keep ourselves always in touch with the body and the breathing, but also whatever else arises in the mind, in the heart, or in the body. We notice it, we appreciate it. But then we just let go of it, just let it float away. So we sit peacefully, easily. Breath by breath, always coming back to the precious, sacred, life-giving breath. Thank you, everybody. How nice to sit together. What a great practice, huh? Just to sit. Well, yeah. So today, I thought we could explore a little bit some of the themes that I am bringing up in my book. When you greet me, I bow. It's it's not actually a coherent book with a theme, a particular theme that follows through the whole book. It's a collection of essays that I wrote over a period of many decades, 3 or 4 decades, in which I've been thinking about our practice and in the world and how it works and what the teachings have to do with our lives and how we can understand the teachings in our time, which is after all so different from the time in which they were first proposed. So I've written a lot of stuff. I have a writing habit like Natalie, you just maybe you would rather not have it, but whether you like it or not, there it is. And so I have a writing habit. Actually, it's kind of embarrassing to be a Zen person with a writing habit. It's frowned on, theoretically anyway, in the tradition. But I do have a writing habit, and so been writing a lot of poems and essays and whatnot over the years, and Dharma talks. I usually write my Dharma talks. So there's a lot of stuff, 30 or 40 years go by, and there's a giant stack of stuff, right, that just was produced. And so I was lucky to have one of our Sangha members who's a very astute reader of texts, Cynthia Schrager, who was kind enough to, first of all, find these things, which were all over the place, published in different various places, to find them all, and then to evaluate them and select from all the stuff that had been published, stuff that she felt was worth reprinting. And then to think about all that material further and realize that there were 4 main topics that I had been thinking about over the years. The essays, roughly, not exactly, but you know how these things are. Categorization is always imperfect, but there were roughly 4 topics that I've been thinking about over the years. And the first, so the book is divided into, the essays are divided into 4 baskets with these 4 themes. And the first basket is relationship in the widest and most profound possible sense. Because I realized at some point that Zen practice in particular, as one of the forms of Buddha Dharma, is particularly involved with the question of relationship. We practice together, in Zen. We sit together, we walk together, we eat together. And the Zen literature is dialogues, encounters between people. When the Dharma arises, as we encounter one another, we don't say this one has the Dharma and that one doesn't. The Dharma arises between us and among us. So the first basket is relationship. The second one is the emptiness teachings, which impressed me so much in the beginning of my practice and have continued to be a source of inspiration for me in all the different ways that the emptiness teachings pervade our lives and pervade the Dharma, especially in Mahayana Buddhism, which then is a school. The third basket is cultural transmission, because as an early student of Zen, when I first got interested in Zen, I didn't even know that there was Zen meditation, because the books that were first published in English didn't mention this, And as far as I knew, there were no Zen meditation centers anywhere in America or the Western world. So that's how it was in the beginning. And so, but even though I was a fairly early student in the movement, my teachers were all Westerners. And even though I had studied with and encountered some Asian teachers, my main teachers were all Westerners. I wasn't one who went to Asia, and saw Buddhism in the Asian context. All my training had been in the West. So I was very aware of the need for us in the West to understand Buddhism differently. And so how that works and how we can misunderstand and understand at the same time, as we inevitably will when we don't know the language and we don't know the traditions and we don't know the culture. That's been something that I've been thinking about for a long, long time. So that's the third basket. And the fourth basket is engagement. And now we have an identifiable movement or tendency within Buddhism that we call engaged Buddhism. And Upaya is certainly an exemplar of the power of that movement. But I mean engagement, including all of that, but even in a wider sense, that our lives are our practice. Of course they are. We wouldn't practice if we weren't living human beings with the need to understand our lives and live them in a way that created a sense of sanity and well-being and contribution to the world. So how does this work in our practice? How do we bring our practice to our lives, as we absolutely must? Practice is our lives, right? It's always been our lives, conceived of as having been our lives. So how do we do that? So that's the fourth basket. So relationship, emptiness teachings, cultural transmission, engagement, those four baskets. And so in my Dharma talk on Wednesday night, I focused on the first one, relationship. And I told some stories that I tell in the book. And so they're wonderful stories. I'm going to tell them again. I apologize if you were there on Wednesday and already heard these stories, but they're worth hearing again. And I'll just say a word about them before we go on to talk about the emptiness teachings. So these are from the first essay in the book, the title essay called "When You Greet Me, I Bow," an essay that was published in 2011. So the first story is about a person named Long Tan, who later became a Zen teacher. But at the time of this story, he was a baker. He made rice cakes. And that was his life, and that was his livelihood. But he met the Zen priest Tian Huang, and he was so impressed with Tian Huang that he closed up his bakery and became a disciple. And Tian Huang was also impressed with him and his determination. And so he said to him, "Why don't you be my attendant? And I will teach you the essential Dharma gate." And so that's what happened. And a year later, Long Tan said to him, "When I arrived, you said you would teach me. But so far, nothing has happened." And Tian Huang said, "I have been teaching you." And Long Tan said, "Well, what have you been teaching me?" And Tian Huang said, "When you greet me, I bow. When I sit, you stand beside me. When you bring tea, I receive it from you." The second story is about another great Zen teacher, Guishan. And this is a story of when Guishan was a very seasoned teacher, a little older, and had many disciples. So one day, Guishan was lying down taking a rest, and Yangshan came in. And Guishan said, "Let me tell you about my dream." And Yangshan lead forward to listen. It's funny now that I've just a little footnote, personal aside. I just received recently a letter from one of my most precious teachers, Richard Baker, who mostly lives in Germany now. And he wrote me a letter where he said he had a dream about me. So I had a dream about him also. So I rummaged through all my journals and I found my account of the dream that I had about him, and I wrote him a letter about the dream that I had about him. Just occurred to me now, so I'm reading this. Anyway, Yangshan leaned forward to hear about this dream. And Guishan said, "Would you interpret my dream for me? I want to see how you do it." And in response, Yangshan brought a basin of water and a towel. And Guishan washed his face and sat up. And just then, Shangyan came in. And Guishan said, "Yangshan and I have been sharing miracles." This story is recounted in a fascicle of Dogen's called Miracles. Yangshan said, Guishan said, "Yangshan and I have been sharing miracles. This is no small matter." And Xiangyan said, "I was next door and I heard you." And Guishan said, "Why don't you try?" And Xiangyan made a bowl of tea and brought it to Guishan. And then Guishan praised both of these monastics, saying, "You two students surpass even Shariputra and Modgalyana, who were famous disciples of Buddha, with your miraculous activity." So those are the stories. And don't you recognize them as typical Zen stories? They just sound like Zen stories, don't they? So when you think about relationships, right, in your life and the way we understand relationships, what of course we all, everybody would agrees, I think, oh, relationships are very important. Even curmudgeonly people, who don't like other people, will say that relationships are important somehow. We need each other, right? We need other human beings. We need to be heard. We need to be loved. We need to be met by each other. So we, as human beings, we all have needs that we fulfill for one another. In the pandemic, many people have said, "Oh, it's been so hard not to be able to really, hug somebody or be in someone's presence. Thank God for the screen, we're not completely alone, but it's not the same." I've been very influenced in my life by the writings of the great German Jewish philosopher Martin Buber. I'm sure all of you know about his I, thou, so-called in English, I, thou philosophy. Ich and du, I guess is how you say it in German. Yeah, I don't know how you say it, but anyway, he distinguished between that aspect of human relationship which we all engage in and must engage in, which in English is translated as I, it. And the I, it relationship is a relationship which could be very affectionate and very kindly, in which we fulfill one another's needs. We have needs and we need each other to fulfill them. But then he distinguished between that necessary kind of relationship and another kind of relationship that is more subtle and maybe something we don't notice or don't even know about. And he called this the I thou or the I you relationship, in which we are not fulfilling each other's needs, but we are somehow each one going beyond ourselves to meet one another in a way that transcends whatever needs we may have. In Zen, we call this kind of relationship intimacy, not in the ordinary sense of intimacy, but in a dharmic sense, in which intimacy is a synonym for awakening. We go beyond ourselves and our needs and our senses of being a separate person to be illuminated by that which we encounter. We go beyond me and you relating to one another to being created in the moment of the encounter. We go beyond our own story and the particularity of who we are as people. And we meet one another on some new ground in which a meeting and the difference between us is also merging. And that's what I think is indicated in these stories. And that's why these stories seem so true in a way and so strange, right? Like, what is going on here? They seem odd to us because the relationships are not I-it relationships, which is mostly what we know about, but they're I-you or I-thou relationships. In a way, you know, we like to practice, and we do practice to help our lives, right? I mean, who would be practicing if we didn't think it did us some good, right? If we think practice is going to help us somehow. It makes us calmer or happier or helps us to cope, right? If we didn't think it had that effect, we probably wouldn't be doing it. And yet, in the end, practice is not about helping our lives. It's about throwing away our lives altogether and entering into this kind of relationship moment after moment after moment. And we don't even really need another person for that. I mean, we do, but the other person is always there, even if they're not there. So when you sit in Zazen, if you're all by yourself somehow in the Himalayas in a cave and you're sitting in Zazen and you're breathing, on every breath, that relationship is there because everyone in your life is there with every breath. You're never alone when you throw away your life and don't think you have your life and need to be fulfilled. And that's what these stories are about. Maybe we could say it's the absolute level or the transcendent level of our being human. And it's so interesting and so important that in these times, and this is certainly true in the United States, I suppose it's probably true all over the world, I don't know. But now we're very much concerned about our identities, right? In other words, our particularities, whether we're a man or a woman, what gender we identify with, what our sexual orientation is. Nowadays in America, you know, what our political affiliation is. We're really divided into tribes that can barely recognize one another across tribal divisions. What our religion is, what race we are, you know, this is something that is very, very important now as we sort these things out because these things have not been noticed. And so if we're not in a dominant position, which is able to blithely assume universality, then we want to assert, no, I'm this, I'm that. And so that's really important. It's an important stage of development, and we have to be doing that. But at the same time, we throw all that away in Dharma. And we are just the breath, just life. Anyway, I didn't say all that Wednesday night, so wanted to tell you the stories again and just talk about them a little bit differently than I did Wednesday night. But that's not what I want to talk about today. Mostly, I want to go into the emptiness teachings and say a little bit of the things that I say in the book, in some of my essays in the book about the emptiness teachings, which impressed me so much. When I was I was philosophically challenged. Uh, in other words, I was on a quest to understand reality somehow. I don't know why that would be the case. Maybe because of the question of death, which bothered me. Death is a big problem, of course, if you're human, right? Humans are unique, in that we know that we die and that our life ends in some way. Our consciousness includes that thought very um, inherently, and so we ponder this, right? It's a sort of like uh, thinking about this and trying to understand, and that's how I got involved in Buddhism, and the emptiness teachings really seem to me to meet my concerns in a way that nothing else that I had studied or practiced did. And so the Heart Sutra, is so simple, right, and profound. And I'm assuming that a lot of us here are Zen students quite familiar with the Heart Sutra. All dharmas are empty. All dharmas are marked by emptiness. They have the mark of emptiness. They don't appear. They don't disappear. They're not tainted. They're not pure. They don't increase. They don't decrease. And form is emptiness, the Heart Sutra says. And emptiness is form. In other words, there actually is no such thing as emptiness. Emptiness is form. And form doesn't mean form, I mean only form. Form is a shorthand. It's the first of the 5 skandhas. Form, feelings, perceptions, volitions or impulses, and consciousness are the 5 skandhas. So when it says form in the Heart Sutra, it's not just talking about external form, it's talking about our human experience. So there is no such thing as emptiness. There's just our human experience. But then what is our human experience? It's empty. So there is no human experience. There's just emptiness. So what does that mean? It must mean that the way we take our human experience, the way we feel it, the way we understand it, the way we live it, is not the way it actually is. We don't think, we don't live. Form is emptiness. We live form is form. Feelings are feelings. Volitions are volitions. Perceptions are perceptions. Consciousness is consciousness. We don't say consciousness is empty. Our perceptions are empty. Our volitions are empty. Our bodies are empty. Our feelings are empty. We don't think that. So that's the journey of practice, is to understand our experience in a liberative way, because the way we understand our experience now is clearly in a way that causes us a lot of trouble. Just look at the world, right? Just read the newspaper, and it's pretty obvious that human beings understand their lives in a way that causes an enormous amount of suffering. So that's what the journey of the emptiness teachings is all about. So I'm going to read you a few pages from an essay in the book called Beautiful Snowflakes, which is about emptiness, and it appears on page 79 of the text. I'm going to read a bit from this essay. The first time I encountered this English word, emptiness, which is one translation of the Sanskrit word shunyata, or in Chinese ku, which I know that Roshi Joan and Kaz have collaborated to translate that word as boundlessness, but it's generally translated as emptiness. And I encountered the word as emptiness when I first was reading about it. And I thought it was right away, I took to the idea. Some would find this word chillingly abstract or even a little scary. But as I say, I loved it. And I would chant the Heart Sutra every day. If I was with Sangha, chanting it with Sangha. But if I wasn't with Sangha, chanting it on my own, sometimes going for long walks and chanting it over and over. And I did that for years before I ever investigated. What does this mean? And what did teachers say about it? I never even thought about to do that. I just wanted to chant it. And I had my own sort of intuitive sense about what it was. And I remember, I tell in this essay, early on, the very beginning of my practice, I was practicing in upstate New York, rural upstate New York. And I remember it was snowed a lot up there. It was a very snowy place. And I remember walking in the woods during a blizzard, the snow, big, thick, wet snowflakes falling down. 2 feet of snow everywhere I went, my tracks being covered up immediately as I walked, chanting the Heart Sutra over and over and over again. I remember it very vividly, even though I have a horrible memory, but somehow I remember that very vividly. In the snow with trees, bushes, and ground covered in white, 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 and in the sky white with whiteness falling down, I could really understand the emptiness of all dharmas. And only it was later only that I began to study extensively the many, many texts that describe and detail the emptiness teachings. The Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, the Prajnaparamita Sutra in 8,000 lines, the Prajnaparamita Sutra in 25,000 lines and 100,000 lines, Nagarjuna's verses from the Middle Way, and many other treatises on emptiness. Shantideva's classical final chapter. Many, many things I studied over the years to try to understand a little better these feelings that I had so strongly at the beginning of my practice. So the logic of emptiness is airtight. It's logical teaching, but it's also experiential. Because when you analyze or look very, very, very closely at your own experience, and even starting with your breath, the emptiness teachings immediately become obvious. But the logic of emptiness is beautifully airtight. Like all simple truths, its clarity is immediately self-evident. We exist. And this means, of course it means, that there is no moment in which we can be separate and apart, torn from the fabric of reality. To exist is to be connected, of course, to the air, to the earth. I mean, we would be flying in the sky were it not for the earth's gravitational attraction to us. In other words, you can't exist without being connected at all points. You're connected to the past, of course you are. You're connected to the future. You're connected to everyone you ever knew. You're connected to the objects that your body touches. You're connected to the air you're breathing. You're connected to the earth you're standing on. You're connected to the sky. Every moment you're within the fabric of reality. You cannot be a separate, ripped out entity. Every thought, every emotion, every action, every moment of time has multiple causes and multiple reverberations, tendrils of culture, history, hurt, and joy that stretch out mysteriously and endlessly. As with us, so with everything else. All things influence one another. That's how the world appears, shimmers and shifts moment by moment. But if things always associate with and bump up against each other, that means they touch each other. And if they touch each other, they must have parts, because if things don't have parts, they couldn't touch. They would just sort of like completely merge into one another. They would disappear. So they have parts that enable them to contact one another, but the parts also have parts. A nose is a part of a face. An airplane wing is a part of an airplane. Things have parts. They can be broken up into parts. But the parts also have parts. And on and on. An infinite proliferation of parts till you get down to, atoms and quarks and whatnot. Clouds of particles that may or may not actually exist. The more you get close to them, the more you analyze them. And this is true not only of the physical world, but it's true of our thoughts and our feelings and all the elements of our consciousness. If you look, in other words, closely enough at anything and truly enough at anything, including your very breath, it will disappear. It will become ungraspable. Everything is empty of actual concrete existence. You can't find anything anywhere. The only thing you find is connection, void, touching void. And so it really, to me, when I read about this and studied about this, and that was, that's my sort of attempt to summarize a lot of abstruse, writing about it. I thought this is really true. And also, unlike other truths, there's nothing here that's actually being proposed, because emptiness itself is empty. You know what I mean? It's not like you're saying everything is empty, so therefore the only thing that's true is emptiness. But no, emptiness is also empty. There's no emptiness, right? There is no such thing as emptiness. So how can you argue with that, right? There's nothing to argue with, because there's nothing being proposed. The emptiness teachings are very strong on this point. We are not proposing the truth of emptiness. Emptiness is empty. We're just saying that things are not as they seem to be. And even that is not exactly true. But that's not the important part, of course. The important part is the taste of emptiness in the body, in the spirit, in our view of our lives, and in our emotions. What happens is just what happens. Our liking it or not liking it, our saying it's this or that, or defining it in this way and that way, those are all extra things that we add to it, and they can be valuable if we like them or not, don't like them, but they don't really tell us anything about what's going on. My body, my thoughts, my emotions, my perceptions, my desires, hopes, actions, words, all that is the stuff that makes up my life and your life. But when I realize its ungraspable and cloud-like nature, when I'm not projecting onto it a me or a thingness that it doesn't ever possess, then my life no longer has to be desperate. I don't have to be so obsessed with getting what I want or not getting what I want. I am just that cloud of emptiness. And within it, I am free. And within it, I am all the time however lonely I may feel myself to be, connected. I can float in that cloud, and I can watch it like clouds in the sky move and form and reform and dissolve as it always will. Now, this could sound a little, like I'm in some sort of Buddhist Shangri-La of disassociation, but it's actually quite exactly the opposite of that. Because when I know that there's no separate me over there that needs to be satisfied or dissatisfied, that there's no person or place beyond my concern, oh, I'm okay over here, too bad about them over there. No, when I understand that I am completely implicated and connected with everything, then there's a lot of warmth and compassion in my life. And this to me is the true greatness of Zazen. And we could interpret Zazen as just silence. So the concept of silence, I have lots of dialogue with Christian monastics. And even though actually a lot of Christian monastics do practice Zazen, but even if they don't, the tradition in their tradition, the idea of silence as a way of connecting to the divine is crucial. So we experience that silence when we practice Zazen because we're resting in emptiness. As I've been saying, the breath comes and goes. What is the breath? Can you grab hold of the breath? And isn't this breath literally a breath that I'm sharing with everyone who has ever lived and everyone who ever will live? The rhythm of the breath, as I said a little bit in the meditation, I didn't mean it as a metaphor. It actually is the ocean, the coming and going of the ocean, the turning of the planets around the sun, the day and the night, the life and the death of our lives. That rhythm is the breath. And it's so beautiful in Zen monasteries when we wake up before dawn. They do this also in the Christian monasteries and sit together to feel this 0 point that underlies every moment of our walking and talking and eating and thinking. When we return to Zazen, we're returning to emptiness. Not that it's not always there, it is, but we're reminded of it and we actually are touched by it when we sit. They say in Mahayana Buddhism that emptiness and compassion are like the two wings of the great bird. And when you have two wings, you can soar and you can float on the air. But really, the two wings are one wing. When you can appreciate the flavor of emptiness on the tongue, you know immediately, without any mediation to it, that love is the only thing that exists. Emptiness actually is love. That's really what emptiness means. And what a great thing to hold in your mind. All problems, all joys, all living, all dying, all the tragedies of the world are all, however much they don't seem to be, expressions of this love. So here's a section from another essay in the emptiness section. This one was published in 2012, and it appears on page 99 of the text. And if you are following the text, you know that I'm not actually reading the text exactly. I'm sort of reading some words, but also just talking. Anyway, this one is, I'm reading this because this approaches the emptiness teachings from another angle. And this is called Impermanence is Buddha Nature. So Buddhism is of course famous for its emphasis on impermanence. People who know almost nothing about Buddhism will say that. Will say, oh yes, Buddhism emphasizes impermanence. And it's hard to argue with impermanence, right? Who can deny that things are impermanent? Things don't last. They change all the time. They morph constantly. And so that means that, holding on to things, including, our body, like, for example, that doesn't ever stay the same from one day to the next. And eventually, age takes its toll and so on and so on. And eventually our body won't support our life anymore. So nothing can really be held on to. And to appreciate the real meaning of impermanence is something very profound. And most of us don't appreciate it. And not appreciating impermanence, we that's why we suffer, right? We want that which we can't have. I want to live, but I have to die. I want to be with those I love, but I can't be for very long. But when we do really appreciate the truth of impermanence, and we fully understand and fully merge with that truth and accept it, then we can really have a deep and lasting happiness. So a while ago, I had a dream. And in 2000, I forgot the dream now, but in 2012, it was very much on my mind. And here's the dream. We're in this hazy sort of grotto, me and my mother-in-law. And we're approaching the same spot from opposite directions. And we're meeting in the middle, and we're trying to squeeze through a narrow doorway, the two of us. You can see that, like it's like a comedy routine almost. She comes from one side, I'm from the other. We meet in the middle, and we're stuck together in this threshold, this doorway. And both my mother-in-law and I are fairly large people, so we're stuck in there, and we can't get through. Finally, we do make it through. We squeeze through. She goes to her side, the opposite from where she came from. I go to my side, the opposite from where I came from. So in 2012, I had plenty of dreams about my mother-in-law because her situation was a daily cause of concern for my wife and I. She, at this time, was in her 90s with multiple health problems. She was bedridden. She was in a lot of pain. She had trouble sleeping. She was losing the use of her hands and feet because of neuropathy. She was in a real pickle. At this time, she was still living in her house with my father-in-law, who was a few years older than her. They had been married at that point like 60 some years. And he had really bad Alzheimer's disease. He couldn't speak a coherent sentence. He didn't know who he was or where he was. So what a pickle, you can imagine, right? And yet, my mother-in-law is a very positive person. and she thought she had a good, great life. She knew she had problems, but she was very happy to be alive. She was never thinking about dying or death or any of that stuff that I've been obsessed with my whole life. Poor me, you know. And the only thing she wants is a good and pleasant and happy life. And even though she doesn't have that right now and she's a little bit miserable, you know, she's very positive. So in 2012, I was, you know, fairly healthy. I didn't expect to die anytime soon. And yet, as I said, you know, I'm all my life thinking about death. And how else, you know, would I have devoted myself full time to Buddhist practice for the last 40 or 50 years without really doing anything else except scribbling about it once in a while? Why would I do that if it wasn't like my unhealthy and ridiculous and neurotic problem with death, which I probably should be more like my mother-in-law and not be thinking about it all the time? So this is a fun, so this dream, you know, was really intriguing to me. In the dream, is my mother-in-law about to pass from life to death? And she's temporarily stuck in this crowded doorway trying to pass through? If that's so, then I must be dead. I'm on the other side of the doorway trying to pass through to her side, which of course doesn't make any sense. But then again, as I say, I've been thinking about this my whole life. You'd think it would make more sense to me as time went on, but it makes less sense to me as time goes on. And some days, I'm convinced that life and death don't really exist. That life and death are a conceptual framework built into our brains that we're so convinced of and so confused by, and that it doesn't help us to have that concept, but it's just a concept. Now, to be sure, there are people that we know that we used to see and that we don't see anymore because they seem to be gone, and that this having generally been the case with others, it seems reasonable to assume that it will also be the case with oneself at some point. But what does it all mean? You know, how do we understand such a thing? I remember being struck when my mother passed away long time ago. I always lived far away from my mother and I didn't see her very often. So in my life, my mother was pretty much absent. You know, I didn't think about her much and she was absent. Then she died and I thought, well, she's still absent. What's the difference? And I could never figure that out. And then, you know, there's all these other strange anomalies that, you know, you don't think about much, like what, you know, everywhere in the world, they believe in ghosts, the appearance of people who have died appear to us, you know, the idea of reincarnation, all these things, you know, that people believe in. How do you account for all that? Some religions call death eternal life. In Buddhism, the great sages like the Buddha don't die. They don't say like the Buddha died. They say the Buddha entered parinirvana, which is something other than death. In Buddhism, as you know, death is not considered to be death. Death is a staging area for further life. So the great religions of the world are you know, very much not saying that death is death. So what about that? So our everyday Zen community is an older community. Many of us are 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. We have members in their 90s. So we're always, so talking about impermanence. And we always see it and appreciate it in all the teachings that we study. All conditioned things pass away. Nothing will remain as it was. The body will change. As I say, it will naturally lose its powers as it ages. And as that happens to the body, it also, the way you look at life changes, right? Those of you who are older can attest to this. You don't feel about life the way you felt about life 30 years ago. Your view of things is different. The other day, a friend of mine, the other day in 2012, a friend of mine who studied with the great Korean Zen teacher, Sun Sanim, said, we were young, and Sun Sanim would always say, soon dead. And when he said that, we thought that was very charming and very true. But now, 30 or 40 years later, this is a very personal thing. I understand those same words in a different way now. What is impermanence, really? I mean, like I say, all my life, I guess it's because I grew up with my grandfather who was always dying and then did die when I was quite young. Maybe that's why. And everybody would never, nobody would ever say anything about it to me. It was a secret, even though it was very obvious. So that's why I was very fascinated with the whole thing and obsessed with it. But anyway, when you're young, even though you know what death is, as it was for me, it becomes like almost a philosophical problem, but it gets very personal the older you get, right? Death may be the ultimate loss, the ultimate impermanence. When we talk about impermanence, usually we talk about death in the next breath, but really, impermanence is not something that happens later, because right now we're all alive here and we could all say, yes, we get it that we will all die, but that's later. Even if we're quite old, it's not today, it's later. Something is here now, our life is here now. Later, maybe it won't be. I am or I have something now, maybe later I'll lose it. But later is the safest of all time frames. Why? Because it's later. Why worry about it now, right? Later is very safe. Yeah, later maybe, but okay, but why worry? Isn't it ridiculous to be worrying about later? Later actually never comes. There's always a later. So in a way, we brush off impermanence because it's later. But it's not later. It's right now. All conditioned things have the nature of vanishing. And they're vanishing right before our eyes. Our eyes are not acute enough to see it, but it's happening. Things that appear now have the nature of impermanence. Things don't vanish later. They are vanishing moment by moment right now. Right before our very eyes. It's one of the best kept secrets going. That we're losing our life and everything we possess right now on every single moment. Right now, all of us are squeezing uncomfortably through that narrow doorway that my mother-in-law and I were squeezing through. We don't know whether we're coming or going. Which side are we on? Are we on the living side or are we on the dying side? We are always in that doorway, squeezing through. Impermanence is not later. It's not that there is something that changes. Everything isn't and is at the same time. So that's all impermanence as loss, right? But then there's the other side of it. Impermanence is not really loss, ever lost. Nothing is ever lost. That's a law of physics, right? Things transform. They don't actually disappear. They're never lost. Impermanence is change. And change is always good and bad. Change is a renewal, right? It's a refreshment, which depends on loss, right? Because the new doesn't appear until the old ceases. They say on New Year's Eve, out with the old and in with the new. And it's both nostalgic and sad and also very hopeful at the same time. As with the scene of the Buddha's passing in the Parinirvana Sutra, there's despair and equanimity at the same time. There are great depictions of this scene in art where this giant figure of the Buddha is lying down, having just entered Parinirvana, and all the disciples are weeping and desolated, and all the bodhisattvas have sweet smiles on their lips because they understand that nothing is lost and that the new arises because the old passes. So now we get to where the title of my essay comes from, which is an essay by Dogen, who writes, "Impermanence is itself Buddha nature." Impermanence is Buddha, which seems like the opposite. We've been bemoaning. All I've been saying so far is about, oh no, impermanence, terrible, awful, disturbing. But no, here we learn impermanence is Buddha. For Dogen, impermanence is not a problem to be overcome with diligent effort on the path. Impermanence is the path. That's what's so beautiful to me about our Soto Zen tradition. We're not trying to overcome impermanence. We see impermanence as Buddha and as the path. Practice is not a way to cope with or overcome impermanence. It's the way to appreciate impermanence, to love impermanence, to live it and embrace it. If you want to understand Buddha nature, Dogen writes, you should intimately observe cause and effect over time. When the time is ripe, Buddha nature manifests. In explaining this teaching, Dogen, in his usual inside out, upside down kind of way, and as Noah mentioned, soon you'll be spending time contemplating Dogen at Upaya with some of the great Dogen experts that we have. And I certainly recommend that you do that because Dogen's teachings are so profound, and the people who are presenting on those teachings are really wonderful in their expositions of Dogen. Anyway, Dogen writes that practice is not so much a matter of changing or improving the conditions of your inner or outer life, as much as it is a way of fully embracing and appreciating those very same conditions that you wish were different, especially and supremely the condition of impermanence and loss. When you practice Dogen's phrase, the time becomes ripe, you see this. The time becomes ripe seems to imply a later, right? Time is not ripe and it's going to ripen. But when Dogen writes about this, he understands it in the opposite way. He doesn't mean time is going to ripen. He means time is ripe. That's what time is. Buddha nature always manifests in time, There's no Buddha nature, eternally. There's Buddha nature only in time, because time is always impermanence. Because that's right. Time is what? Time is development. Time is change. Time goes on, right? Isn't that something? It always goes on. That means there's always loss and there's always renewal. That's what time is: loss, renewal. Present time is ungraspable. As soon as a moment of time arises, it's already the past. As soon as you're here, you're gone. If that wasn't so, how could the new you of the next moment appear if the old you of the last moment didn't disappear? Unless the last minute you dies, the next minute you can't be born. So that means that your being here is thanks to your not being here. If you were not here, you couldn't be here. Which seems ridiculous to say, like a trick or something, but it's really true. Because things don't appear unless they appear in time. And whatever appears in time appears and vanishes at the same time, like we've been saying. Time is all of this. And Dogen calls time Buddha. Buddha, he says, Buddha nature is no other than all are, because all are is Buddha nature. All are. Are is existence, being, time, impermanence, change. All are, existence, being, time, impermanence, and change, is never lonely. It's always all inclusive. We are always profoundly and poignantly in this together. So here I recount talking to somebody in 2011 or 12 in there, an old Zen student. She said she was beginning to notice that the persistent feeling of dissatisfaction that she always felt in relation to others, in relation to the world, in relation to the circumstances of her inner and outer life, that this dissatisfaction she was beginning to notice was probably not, as she had thought, about others, about the world, or about herself. There was something more profound to it. She said to me, it's not that I'm dissatisfied about something, even myself. It's that the dissatisfaction actually is myself. The dissatisfaction is so ingrained in me. I've been mistaking it, thinking that it's about something and I could straighten it out, but actually it is me. Before that, she thought, well, I must be deficient in some way, or the world is deficient, or there's something wrong with my friends or my life circumstances. And she was hoping, for all these years that her Zen practice was going to fix this somehow. And it never did. But now she saw that the reason it never did was that the problem was far worse than she had thought. The dissatisfaction was not about her or the world, and it was not correctable. It was herself. And I think this is exactly what the Buddha noticed. That's why the Buddha taught non-self. So we all need to have a healthy ego. because that's how we get through the day. That's how we relate to one another. The healthy ego is a necessity for our meeting one another in the conditions of our lives. We're not supposed to transcend the ego. We should all have normal and healthy egos if possible. But the essential grounding of ego is the false notion of permanence, that the ego exists in some ongoing way, which we all believe, even though I actually think we all know it's not true. I think we're all operating in this world on the basis of something that we believe as a fundamental truth, even though at the same time we know it's not true. I am me, I have been me, I will be me. Yes, I can change. I know I can. I have changed. I want to change. But still, I'm always here. This is me. And it's always been like that. But this ignores the reality that all conditioned things have the nature of vanishing and are vanishing constantly as a condition of their existing in time, whose nature is vanishing. No wonder we feel, as the Buddha said at the very beginning, a constant nagging sense of dissatisfaction and disjunction that we might well interpret as coming from a personal failing, which is a sophisticated step, because before that we blame it on everybody else, which is worse, right? Now we blame it on ourselves. But no, all is Buddha nature. All are is Buddha nature. This means that the self is not, as we imagine, an unprovable, permanent, isolated entity that we and we alone are responsible for. I think we all have an over, I think we all have an overdeveloped sense of personal responsibility that is off the mark. We are impermanence, never alone, never isolated, never responsible solely, but only responsible with everything else, constantly flowing and absolutely immense. Every one of us, absolutely immense. We're scared, I think, of our own immensity because we are Buddha. We are Buddha nature itself. The other day, I guess on Wednesday, Noah said, maybe you'll read some of your own poems. At least I thought he said that. So before we take a break, and I apologize for speaking for so long, I'll read you a poem. See if I can find it here. That's the wrong one. Yes, this is a poem. The essay I read for you just now was about my mother and father-in-law. Both of them are now passed on, which was an enormous thing, for my wife, as you can imagine. They died about, I think, 3 or 4 years apart from each other. My father-in-law first, and then my mother-in-law. So this is a poem about the last days of my mother-in-law. It's called Last Light. And, I have been writing a lot during the pandemic. It's really been a little strange because this book I'm talking about today came out in May of this year, a couple months ago. The month before this book came out, a poetry book came out of mine called There Was a Clattering As, which is a pandemic poem, which is quite strange and unbelievable. There was a clattering as that came out in April. And in March, another poetry book came out called Nature. So in the last 3 months, I've had three. In those 3 months, I had 3 books come out, one in each month, right? That never happens. And the other day, I was reading final proofs for another book that's coming out in the next month or two called The Museum of Capitalism. Catchy title, right? The Museum of Capitalism. So this poem that I'm going to read to you comes from the Museum of Capitalism. Since I was reading it the other day, it's on my mind. But it's about my mother-in-law. Light, light everywhere. Can this be the rhyme to which I repair? Can this be the song engaging my pipes? The boogeyman behind the drapes? Water, water, more, says she, and not a drop goes down. Water, water, not light, as little light as death would offer. Look, let's join the others for a picnic. Listen, glisten, desert sky, so dry. Antelope graze there in groups of dozens. Set me higher, set me lower. Water, water, give me more. Light, light, wipe my mouth. Is she comfortable? Are you? Ouch! Ouch! My arm, my hand, my mouth, my grand journey. As much water as you need. And some pain meds to get some sleep. Not so stark as poetry. Poetry at a time like this, a bad case of poetry whose destitute words, mortifying words, clarifying words, unsinkable words, unsupportable words, name the urges. Help me, water, water. And not a drop goes down in poetry's confines, rarefied and sanctified, be thy holy name, crucified and digitized in this mortal frame. Pick me up and put me down, feed my heart of flame. I want to, I want to, I want to thank, give praise inside the flame, inside the light, inside the water. Just one time, one little last time, one more battle, one more day, one more chance to fade away. Another time on a newer moon, stark and yellow in the blaring. The book of Esther and the book of Ruth, the book of Judith and the book of Job, surrounded and besieged. Water, water, a bite, a bite. This severed head, a story never ends, a river never bends. Let's go home and light some last lights for the miracles, the strong in the hands of the weak, the many in the hands of the few, the polluted in the hands of the pure, the crooked in the hands of the honest, the living in the hands of the dead, the dark in the hands of light, day in the hands of night, water in the fist of flame, lanky horses in an open field, flaming trees and a leathery mouth, a red ball bouncing on white foamed waves, ladies in their slippers on long summer nights, Hawaii slide guitars elevating the irony of the text. When I say you will rejoice, I mean you must be miserable now, under the heel of the phlegm. Take off that mask. Free at last. Be silent, all flesh. Wonderfully I shall perjure. Remove my filthy clothes. Wipe my face, moisten my lips. Let the accuser be dismissed. For Yolanda Yaki, March 12th, 1923 to January 1st, 2017. She was a great lady. Very courageous, very tough. People these days are not as tough as she was, I think. So it's 10:51. We can be very precise now. We have our computers, and we can be confident that if the computer says it's 10:51, it's 10:51 where I am. It's something 51 where you are, right? So let's take a 10-minute, an 8-minute break now. It's 10:52 or whatever 52, and let's come back on the hour, okay? And I would encourage you. So I've been yakking for a while, and I don't want to take up too much of your break time, but I would encourage you, whatever you do during your break, go to the bathroom, get a drink, whatever you do, stay close to yourself and just check yourself. Like, what are you feeling? What's in your heart? Be attentive to yourself, okay, during this time. And we'll come back on the hour. All right. Thank you very, very much for listening. I hope you could stay with all that, and we'll talk more later.
Thank you, Norman, so much. Wonderful.
Now,
Sorry, I
between
had to start the recording again.
that's okay. We have about an hour between now and the time that we are going to break for lunch. And so this is an hour for interaction and conversation. And I thought that we could start the hour with a 10-minute conversation with one other person. And I'm assuming that Noah can set us up in dyads rather quickly, that it won't be too cumbersome. Am I right in that, Noah?
Yeah, that might work. There's a limit to the number of breakout rooms we can have.
Oh, there
I
is.
think it's 100. So it would be twos or threes probably, unless
Okay.
a bunch of people usually leave when you go into breakout rooms.
Yeah, if you set up 100 breakout rooms, that means there would be a few people that would be in groups of 3, but that'd be okay. And so this is very quick. So the idea is this is a way to, everybody gets a chance to talk and kind of unburden your mind and see what you're thinking. Maybe you don't know what you're thinking, but if you talk, maybe you'll find out. That's the idea. So here's the subject that I would like you to try your best to say something about, each one about 5 minutes in this 10-minute period. And the question is, I was talking about impermanence, but then I ended up talking about time, as you will have noticed. Time. Now, we all know about time, right? We know the years go by, and we all have clocks, and we all have calendars. But when you think about it, when we think time, what we really mean is not time, we mean the measurement of time. That's what we think of time as, being the measurement of time in hours, minutes, and so on. But what about the experience of living in time, which I think is also something that is very prominent when you sit. So this is what I'm asking you to talk about. It's actually not so easy to talk about this, and it's a little vague and hard to grasp, but that's what's fun about it. What will you have to say about this question of your own personal experience, not your theory, but your own personal experience of what it actually is like for you to live in time. So Noah's going to put us into groups, and in 10 minutes, however much time you can give to this, and maybe you don't have much to say, or maybe you can think of something to say that you're surprised by. Let's talk about your actual experience of living in time. Okay, and then the groups will end and we'll go on and we'll just open up the conversation in general. Okay, so let's see what happens if we go into groups.
Okay, so with so many groups, I can't do it manually. So everyone's going to be assigned, including you, Norman.
Yeah,
If you don't want to be in a group,
no,
you know,
fine. We'll all be in groups. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, great. So we've already lost 40 people. Hopefully they'll come back in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
If there's no one in your group, I'll try to make sure that you get into another one.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
here we go.
We'll all
Now
be
there's two.
Whatever happens, they'll be fine.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Oh, we keep losing people. All right, here we go. Please go ahead and join the breakout room. That there are a few of you still on. Are you able to see the breakout rooms? Susan, Marianne Tucker, Karen Edwards, someone named donation. You should see a message that says, please join this breakout room. You see that?
Hello?
Yeah. Do you, Susan, do you see a join breakout room?
I pressed not now.
Oh, so you're not joining?
I just rather hang out here.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, what's your experience of time? The problem is, you know, I assign people to rooms, so there's people that are not in, they're in a room with just themselves. So I'm trying to make sure that there's enough people to talk to each other.
Okay.
So
I just want to be quiet. I don't want to be in a breakout room.
right. So that's fine.
Okay.
There's a lot of people coming back. Hi, everyone. Sorry if your breakout room didn't work. There's a lot of people who've rejoined now. Are all of you who are rejoining not wanting to be in breakout rooms?
Yes.
Yes.
All right,
No, I just was by myself.
Yeah, by myself.
everybody.
I ended up by myself. I would love to be in a group, but
Okay, how about Margaret and MJ? Let's see if you can, or let's see, I'll put you in a room with someone else, see if this works.
all right, let's see.
There are more. MJ, okay, so anybody else want to go into a breakout room that hasn't been assigned?
Sure. Carolyn?
Hi, Carolyn. Okay, let's see. And the rest of you just want to hang out?
Yes, Noah, I would like to. Sandra. Just hang out. Lee, just hang out.
Oh, yeah, got it. Yeah, it's difficult with just two people trying to
Yeah, it didn't work.
get everyone in there.
I'm just going to hang out until we come back.
Well, if
I
anyone
would
who
like
wants to
to
share
just
about
hang out
their
too.
experience of time,
That's okay.
go.
Thanks.
Just going through the list, seeing if there's anybody else who's in a room by themselves.
I was, but I came back.
Right. And you'd rather not go, right?
I don't care. I'd be happy to go.
Okay. Okay, I think most people are that want to be in rooms are in rooms. Guess
So
I should
you
pause
put-
the recording here.
So you-
All right, Norman, that was an interesting foray into
It was
two-person dyads.
right. It was interesting too. Our diet was very interesting, and I learned a lot from it.
Great.
So now people are coming back. I don't know if everybody, I guess not everybody is quite here. Still people are arriving. But now for the rest of the time, we can sit a little bit if we run out of things to say, or continue to talk until noon. And now maybe if you would be willing, Noah, people could raise their hands electronically, and you could call on people, and people could bring something up. And this is not, I don't conceive of this as, question and answer. It's not that you have a question and I'm going to answer it, so much as it is that you have something to say, and I will respond to what you say. It doesn't need to include a question in it at all. It could just be your observation or your understanding of or whatever you want to say. And then maybe I'll have something to respond, and maybe if I don't, I'll just say, that's great, thank you, and go on to the next person. So is that okay? We can do that. I see a couple of hands raised already.
Yeah,
And
thanks, Norman.
please do call on people, Noah.
Great. And I just first I just want to apologize if you got cut off in your Zoom meeting. I know the endings of those can be a little abrupt. Next time I'll try to send a message first, give you a countdown. So Donna. So Donna, I've asked you to unmute, so you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Donna Estes. Okay. Something happened with her. Okay, let's go to Hoda.
Mute. Okay. I was talking to a wonderful soul called Adrian, and then all of a sudden she disappeared, and technology threw me back into here, and it was all very exciting. So, Adrian, I'm honored to have worked with you. Thank you very much. And what comes into my mind was, well, then, am I separate from time? Like we talked about presence. Time is to be present, and you were talking about the qualities and the fluidity of the concept of time, but it's not a concept anymore because time and space don't exist. So am I separate from time? I had the experience of being, time doesn't pass me by and all of a sudden I have gray hair and wrinkles, but rather I passed through time. So am I and time the same? It is very exciting to be here. It is absolutely wonderful. And thank you, gorgeous lady. Very nice, super soul. I am honored to have worked with you. And yeah, okay, goodbye.
Goodbye. Yeah, that seems very profound to me and true, doesn't it? That it's not like time is this stuff, like an ocean, and we jump in the ocean and swim around in time. Yeah, it seems like we are time. It does seem that way. And there's a lot of I've read a couple of books about the physics, the quantum physics of time And it says something like that, that there is no time, there is no such thing as time, as if it were a substance, or just like space, what in the world is space, what is that? So yeah, I mean, I think we must be that. It seems true what you said. It does seem true and very profound. And yes, it's somehow liberating in some way to feel that. Yeah. Thank you, Hoda. That's beautiful. I remember you from before, so I feel like I get to know you a little bit. Thank you for what you said. Yeah.
Thank you, Hoda. Sarah.
Hi there. Thank you so much for your talk, especially on emptiness, because I, unlike you, came to emptiness, and it's kind of was frightening for me. And I think I just kind of may have been confusing emptiness with nihilism, which I know that's not what it is. But the one thing that's been really interesting for me, I'm reading this book called No Self, No Problem. And I'm really struck by a comment that was made by the author that Helen Keller, who lost her sight and her hearing, had no sense of self until later in her life she learned language. And I'm really, your question about time and the label of time, and how once I start relating to time with that concept, with that word, it changes it for me. And it's like something I want to manage with my watch, and lets me know where I am in the day, and probably helps my ego have a sense that it's somewhere in all of this. So I just wondered if you have any notions about that. And one thing that's been helpful to me is to attempt to stop labeling things, just to see flower and not label it, just look at it and not get into what it is, just be with it. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes, well, in the emptiness teachings, there's a lot of discussion of language. One of the things that's proposed about emptiness is to say that one phrase that you read in the emptiness teachings is, things are mere designations. In other words, they're words, they're concepts, but not actual things. They're empty of the thingness that we propose that they have, and they're only full of designations that we put on them. So language is really, the question of language is really, as you're very astutely pointing out, really of the essence in all of this. I mean, it's too complicated to go into it, and I'm not sure that I understand it particularly, but Dogen himself actually writes about language quite a bit. There's one famous fascicle of his called A Painting of a Rice Cake, which is very famous, and it's about language. And yeah, as you can imagine, as a writer, somebody who writes a lot, one of my main subjects actually is language itself. I mean, when you think about it, you're writing about something, right? You're writing about an idea or about an experience or about a thought or a feeling. But actually, what's really going on is the mind is encountering words. So you realize at some point that you're not really writing about anything other than words. And so, and yet we, just like you said about Helen Keller, we ourselves are a designation. I mean, our name is usually two or more words that our life experience defines, right? And then they say, oh, that Noah Rossiter, when I remember him when he was young, and now he's long gone, and here are all the things that fill up the meaning of those two words, deeds and memories and so on and so on. So yes, language creates, there is no human subjectivity without language, just as you said. And language is a really important thing, and we don't have a very good grasp over how language shapes who we are and what we are. And Dogen's point of view, to make a long story, very long story short, is that as Zen often seems to express, language imprisons us. Language creates our suffering, but we cannot ever get outside of language. So language is also our liberation. Language is our suffering and our liberation. And the question is, how do we live within language? How do we hold our language? And how do we liberate ourselves from within our language? And this actually is what I've been writing about in my poetry very directly for all these years. So yeah, there's a lot to this. But I think some people think, well, let's like get over language, let's let go of it and not be language. But we can't. It's so ingrained in the very sense of self that human beings are language beings. There's just no way around it. So we have to be liberated within language. Anyway, really big question, and something that you could talk about and explore quite a lot. I'm glad you mentioned it, because I think maybe it's time to study, maybe in our Dharma seminar, we'll study again that fascicle of Dogen, a painting of a rice cake, and explore that question a little bit more. So thank you, Sarah. And I hope I'm doing okay with sound, that you can all hear me, I hope.
Thanks, Norman. I can hear you pretty well. Someone had said that Natalie Goldberg was raising her hand physically. So I wonder if we can see if Natalie, do you want to speak up?
I still don't know how to raise your hand on this thing, so I'm glad you saw it. Norman, I just wanted to ask you, when we first did the sitting, and you said that the body, with just sitting and connecting with the body, you can connect with stillness. And you said we can always connect with stillness. And I'm not being facetious. Let's say I'm being walked to be electrocuted. That's what I immediately thought of. And is there a place in the body that, because I imagine my heart will be beating hard, my blood will be going, my face will be flushed, I'll be terrified. Is it possible to connect with a stillness in the body? Then is there some innate stillness that we have no matter what in our body?
Thanks, Natalie. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. And so as you're saying it, I say to myself, well, I don't want to make universal, like proclamations about what anybody else would experience, right? Who knows what anybody experiences? So I suppose if I say that, I'm talking about my own experience, but I do feel, and I'm always ready to be wrong, but I do feel that, yes, we have this in us, all of us do. So it's funny you bring up the idea of being executed, because actually I've not had the experience of being like being almost executed. Although like Dostoevsky and other people did have that experience, right? Where they were about to be executed and they weren't, I never had that experience, but I have had experiences that are, I'm sure you have had, I know you have had, and other people have had, of going to the doctor, right? To undergo some like heinous procedure that is very upsetting and difficult, or even just going to the dentist and having them pull out your tooth, which I've experienced, and this kind of thing. And I exactly do just that. When I am going to go to do something like that, I automatically and immediately feel my body in those moments, and I feel my breathing. And it really, really, really helps me a lot. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't have anxious thoughts or all the rest of it, because yes, I think in dire circumstances, any ordinary person, I don't know about like a Buddha or something, but any ordinary person will experience, anxiety and this and that will have influences in the body. So it's not that all that suddenly goes away and there's some sort of like stillness that just makes you peaceful and joyful. I don't mean that, but there is, nevertheless, even with the anxiety and all that, there is a stillness in the body that I all the time experience when I'm in the dentist or when I'm in the doctor. And I really appreciate that I can do that and that it helps me to get through that moment that would be otherwise be difficult in a better way. So yes, I do think, and the point about, we do practice, and we call it practice for a reason, right? Because we practice it all the time. And I practiced it all my life, right? So therefore it's automatic for me and it's there for me. And Natalie, I'll tell you a personal thing. This is very funny. It's maybe it's too, what do you go? There's a word for too much sharing, but I'll tell you this anyway. since we're all friends and these other people are
TMI.
Yeah, TMI, that's what they say. I just found out yesterday, I never noticed this. Can you believe this? I never noticed this. I found out yesterday that I have a patch of skin on both my legs that is like a different color than the other skin on my leg, and that is somehow leathery skin that is somewhat numb when I touch it on both legs. And that's from sitting on the cushion so much for the last 40 years that there are these places on my leg that are like, I don't know what you call it, scarred or injured but the amazing thing about that is not that that's true, but that I never noticed it, right? Can you imagine? Take a shower every day and whatnot. So just imagine all the things about ourselves that we never noticed before after 40 or 50 years, think about that. That's really kind of amazing. But all that's just to say that I practiced a lot, right? As have you, and have probably many of us in this meeting. And so therefore, when times of trouble and stress come up, which will cause anxious thoughts and so on, we will automatically go to the breath and go to the body, and it will bring us a measure of peace and make things a little easier. And let's hope, we don't know, but let's hope that when we're dying, which might be, I don't know what dying is like, but it might be scary or really hard. It seems to be hard to die. It doesn't seem easy, even for anybody. You never know. Let's hope that at that time, maybe our practice will help us out and make the passage easier. We'll find out. Anyway, thanks for the question. It's a beautiful question. Yeah. Do you do that when you go to the doctor and have a procedure or something? Do you breathe and feel your body?
Of course I do that, but your language made it sound like it was, for me, like there was something special, some special stillness that was magic that I'd never contacted.
Mm-hmm.
That was deep in my bone, but I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, it is magic in a way, but it's sort of everyday magic. It's not, woo-woo magic. It's everyday magic. Yeah.
By the way, Norman, that poem to your mother-in-law was wonderful. It was a really good poem.
Yeah, Kathy's not thrilled about it.
Oh.
But I like it. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you like it. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Norman, and thanks, Natalie. Next, we have Joan's iPad.
Okay.
We
Norman,
hear you.
do you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Well, Joan, hi.
Hi. We met 7 years ago, 7 years ago at Spirit Rock, and I actually had 5 or 10 minutes with you.
Oh.
I'm a psychiatrist, and I was talking about wanting to sit on my porch. This is about relationship and time. So I want to thank Mike, who was in my little breakout group with me. He's about the age of my kids or a little younger. And so I feel like I've formed a new relationship, even for a few moments, that had meaning to me. And I've been, as a psychiatrist analyst, all about relationship. But what you said to me at that time at Spirit Rock about sitting on my porch or wherever and that I could do it and not just have to try to keep saving the world in whatever way I did that. I did some of that then and some of that later, and now I'm 81. But I put out a book of poetry
Oh,
called
congratulations.
Precarious Positions, and I put it out on my 80th birthday, and it was poems that I had written for, I don't know, 20 or 30 years. And somehow you were part of that, not a tremendous part. It might have happened anyway, but you were part of that. And so seeing that and then getting your book these years later and reading it and then being able to connect up today. And I've also met Joan Halifax sometime in the past, but it was wonderful. And I just reminded me that time has just conflated and it's all like one time. Everything else has kind of disappeared, at least for a few moments, as the relationship I remember from then and from looking at you right now and from putting the book out of poetry. And I know you have a number of books of poetry. So I wanted to thank you for that and just hear what you think in terms of relationship and time.
Well, thanks for that, Joan. That's great to hear all of that. That's really, really wonderful. And I think, yes, a poetry book like that has poems in it over a period of 10, 15, 20, 25 years is a very special and wonderful thing. Congratulations on publishing that.
Thank you.
Great title too. Wonderful title.
Well, I always take precarious positions.
Yes, yes. Well, life is a precarious position.
That's for sure.
That's true. Yes, I think that, in the Dharma, there are many stories of this phenomenon where in a moment we touch each other in almost an eternal way. It's almost as if, I mean, this is not the case, but it almost feels as if time stops and becomes eternal, and that moment always exists for us. That moment of encounter that we never forget, and that somehow seems to be ripening our whole life through, is something that, in a way, you could say that every Zen story is a record of such an encounter. And that's why in the stories that I read for you this morning, you don't have the depiction of, like ordinary encounters and ordinary people with ordinary personalities. It's as if something is happening here that's off the books and off the charts, And I think that does happen in our lives. We do have those decisive encounters that seem almost outside the realm of time. But I think what that means is that they are showing us what time is always, but we don't notice it and we don't experience it that way. But in these moments, somehow we experience it. And then, yeah, those are moments to be cherished and to take delight in forever. Yeah. So anyway, it's nice to see you again, and I'm really happy for you. Are you still being a psychiatrist, or have you retired from that?
I'm retired and trying to get used to that still.
Yes, well,
it's not easy.
No, I wouldn't think so, because if you're a psychiatrist, it means that you have had an intense life of interaction with human beings.
Absolutely.
And if you stop doing that, then it's like you have to find a new way to be yourself all over again. So good luck with that. I'm sure you'll find it.
Thanks.
Maybe you'll write more poetry. Maybe you'll.
No. I'm done with the writing. I'm 81. I'm retiring from that also.
Okay.
But I might send you my book.
Well, go ahead. That would be sweet. Go ahead and do that. I'd love to get it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joan. Paula Bromberg.
So I love when moments, I live in a realm that feels like time is circular and it keeps moving. When I am willing to be aware in that dimension. So that just happened. I had maybe 2 weeks ago, I said this to Norman, I think, in one of the talks. I had a niece that in Santa Fe that was taken to the hospital and asked me to participate in this experience she was having. And so I reached out. It was quite serious. She was put in a ventilator. I reached out to Upaya and I asked if someone could be sent from there. And so Jane, thank you, Jane, went over. I guess she was on her way to a retreat. Maybe she came back. So anyway, that was who Noah you put me in a room with Jane. And it was very, beautiful because so Heidi died, had her airlifted to Albuquerque, and the healing, is that the word? The experience is quite profound because I'm alone with it. My family does not allow me to, they don't participate with me. So I've been quietly sitting, shiver along here. And so Jane, it was, thank you, a beautiful contact. And what I was sharing before Jane identified that she was that Jane who went over to Presbyterian and sat with, what I had asked is someone just sit with their presence with Heidi, is that my own body seems to be, I use the word disintegrating, meaning as I'm aging, I'm 79. As I'm aging, it's not the experience that I recall of my body. It's, now I broke a foot in the ocean. I'm on a walker. I can't quite integrate. My mind is sharp. I have a full practice. I just wrote a book also. Maybe I'll send that to you too. The Way of the Lover. It's a beautiful book. And I never thought, interesting what you said to Joan. I thought that would be the end. That book took me about 30 years. And I started another book because I seem to have this habit that Natalie gave me. Thank you, Natalie, of writing. She had a line once that if I had 2 writers and one would practice, I would take that one, even if they didn't have the talent. I said that to you, Natalie. And so it's my practice. It's my teacher. And so, life does continue in my own experience of time, but I don't know. That's all I want to say. It's just, thank you, Norman. It's been a blessing that your book, your presence, and being here today. So
thanks, Paul. And it's really nice to see you again. And thanks for saying all that. And my condolences. Your niece, I guess, was
Heidi.
Yeah, a young person. So
yeah,
always particularly sad when younger people who we expect to live for a long time more, die. That's always really, really sad. So I'm sorry. But a blessing for her that you were care of her and that Jane was there too. So thanks to Upaya and Jane for that, right? Yeah. Thank you. Good to see you again.
Good to be seen.
Yeah.
Paula. Randall.
There we go. Hi.
Randall.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I find your discussion of the quieting of thought and the origins of the practice very interesting, because I have been reading a lot of David Hinton this past year. His books, China Roots, Existence, And that led me to this wonderful book that he wrote or translated, The Mountain Poems of Ling Yun, which putting them all together really addressed the sort of the roots of language and our brain and our thought, time, and this strange barrier of birth and death and the transferring back and forth, and what it is that's really coming and what it is that's really going. And it seems to relate to another talk, it might have been your talk from the other day, where some of this has to do with our concept of where our edge is, our sensation and our body and our mind. When I look at the old teachings of Chan Buddhism and Taoism, they seem to be talking about the real people, the people of old, and how things flowed so naturally to them, and how a lot of the problems developed when we started cognitive processing, the process of thinking, and so forth, versus the Wu way, the just the natural flow. And it's suggesting that the whole concept of time almost becomes a moot point and it's irrelevant once the edges of us go away and we expand further. Sort of like, to me, it's like what's behind the scenes of practicing, and the point of erasing me or being free of me to be connected to the greater outer, and sort of going with the flow. So I wanted to share the source of the material and how I found it particularly invigorating, connecting with some of the viewpoints on how all those subjects that we've been talking about seem to be knitted together in a fascinating way in some of his writings. So I wanted to ask you if you could comment on any of these things about in the Chinese old texts, the real people, the people of old, the people who became the object on which the ancestors were described and written about. Fundamental to the Buddhist teachings and fundamental to the Taoist teachings, where that came from and what it must have been like to be in that state or in that part of that world at that time, what it felt like.
Yeah, thanks for that, Randall. I haven't read those David Hinton books, but I want to. Other people have told me about them, and yeah, I think they must. So I appreciate your telling me about them and your experience of them. And yes, it's certainly true that Zen, as we know it, with in Chan and Zen and San and all the other cultures in which it exists, all of that is a Chinese mediation of Buddhism. The Chinese struggle to understand Buddhism, just as we're struggling to understand Buddhism. And it's a tricky thing because this is like the section on culture, in my book. It's a strange thing because it's 100% guaranteed that you're going to misunderstand. How could you understand something that comes to you in a different language with all kinds of different nuances, a whole different context? How could you possibly understand it? You inevitably will misunderstand it. And yet at the same time, you do understand it in a different way. And so that's just what happened in China. There was a time when the Chinese pretty clearly misunderstood Buddhism because they conflated it with Taoism and other teachings that they already had, because China was, even when they received Buddhism and around the turn of the millennium, were already very sophisticated spiritually. But eventually they did, I think, in my opinion, really understand Buddhism and transform Buddhism by sinicizing it. And that's what we call Zen. Zen is really Chinese Buddhism. It's not a school of Buddhism, it's just Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism. And so, yes, basic Asian, this Chinese concept of being in the world is shared with, Japan, Korea, all these Far East cultures around China, Vietnam, all are sinicized cultures. They're all different, of course, and they're not the same as China, but nevertheless, the Chinese language and Chinese classics are part of their cultures. And they were also, so that the Buddhism was very thoroughly transformed. Same Buddhism, there's nothing in Indian Buddhism that is not in Zen, or that Zen would refute or disagree with. It's all the same, and yet it's held and understood in a different way. And that is what makes Zen, to me, so wonderful, is this Chinese element of it. So anyway, I appreciate all that you were saying. As far as the early people, or whatever, the real people, I'm actually not quite familiar with that concept. Maybe when I read David Hinton, I'll appreciate it more. But it is true, though, that it's a trope of Chinese culture, which is the opposite of the trope that in our culture. In our culture, think about it, the people of the past, they didn't have it right, because we're making progress. So we understand a lot more than the people in the past. So the world is improving all the time, and people are smarter all the time and more astute all the time. And we look back at the people of the past and we say, well, we appreciate them. They were really wonderful, but they don't understand what we now understand. So that's the way we look at it. Now that's beginning to change now, as we're realizing that our progress may not be so great, actually. There might be problems with our progress. But generally speaking, that's Western way of looking at it. Chinese is the opposite. No matter what the time period, the ancient times are always better. The ancient emperors were the ones who really got it. And we in the 3rd century, in the 4th century, in the 5th century, we modern people, we don't understand. We've lost the thread, the way the ancient emperors who lived in mythical time had it. So whether or not that's like literally actually true, and there we could like have a time machine and go back to those people and find them to be as wonderful as they appeared to be in the text, I don't know, it's probably not even a sensible thought one way or the other, but it is an idea. And so, but I think that for us, you and me now, we need to believe that there's nothing that anybody in the past could know or experience that is not also our experience too, right? I don't think that we can say, well, we live in a debased time and we can't. No, I think Dogen writes about this, the Mappo, the time of degenerate Dharma. He honors that teaching about degenerate Dharma, but he says that time is not linear. So degenerate Dharma is this moment, but also the true moment of Dharma is this moment. So it depends on how we practice and how we live. So I think that we are the ancients also. We are the real people, as real as anybody, and we can cherish those stories of the real people and learn from them, but not, maybe, in my opinion anyway, not objectify them as if that was a real thing that's different then than it was now. I think we are the real people, and the people who are alive are always the real people, I think. Anyway, thank you, Randall. And now I'm going to really get those books. Now that you mentioned it, I'm going to really get them and read them.
Really good.
Yeah, thank you. So we have 4 more minutes, so maybe there's one more person can be called on, and then we'll break for lunch.
Yeah. The person labeled phone 5S2.
Okay.
I'm asking you to, there you go.
There he is, or she is.
What's your name?
Can't hear.
Huh. Even though you unmuted, we can't
Yeah.
hear you.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, we could, and now you've frozen.
Froze,
Me
yeah.
now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
You can hear me? Okay. It's interesting because I'm listed as Fran's iPad, so I didn't understand when it was coming up. So my question is, I'm both Jewish and Buddhist, and I see the parallels in the two paths as you do. And I mean, this sounds like sort of a nutty question is, I ask, when is it important to choose which you are? And the point is at death. You know, who's going to claim me at death? And I'm sure you thought about this in some ways, and I'd like you to relate to that.
When you go to the synagogue, be Jewish.
Oh, I'm not getting a sound from.
Can you hear? I guess she can't hear. So Noah, can you type a chat to her?
Yeah, I can try to do that.
Now I can.
Now she can hear.
Can you hear me?
Yes, more faint, but I can hear. So keep your hand up. If you can hear me, put your hand up. And when you can't hear me, put your hand down. Okay, so you're hearing me. So I was just saying that when you go to the synagogue, be Jewish. And when you go to the Zendo, be Buddhist. Or don't be Buddhist, but just be the person in the Zendo. And now it's very economical. If you die and you have yourself cremated, then you can share yourself around. You can have some Buddhist people have part of your ashes, and then the Jewish people could have part of your ashes, even though in Judaism you're not supposed to cremate. But nevertheless, that's actually changing now very rapidly. So I'm sure there are Jewish places that will accept. So you can spread yourself around, all over the place, and you can be everything if you want, or you can make a choice. And that to me, honestly, the most important thing is the people in your life. What do they need? Because you're not going to be there anyway, right? So what do they need from you? And if they need you to be a Buddhist, you should be a Buddhist. And if they need you to be a Jew, then you should be a Jew. If you need to choose, don't choose based on what you think is the best thing. Choose on what and that you can ask them. You could say, like, what would you, where would you rather your children or grandchildren or your friends or your participants in your life, what do they need from you? And then to the best of your ability, you can decide based on what they need. But yeah, I know. I think about that. What do people need from me when I'm dead? How am I going to help them out when I'm dead? And what's the best way to help them out? And so I have to figure that out, just like you do.
For me, it's more the question of not who's going to claim me in this world, but who claims me in the other world. Or is that?
I think in the other world, they're not so disturbed about labels. I think they don't have English in the other world, so they don't have the word Buddhist or Jewish or anything like that, I'm guessing. I don't know, of course. Maybe it'll turn out in the other world like they actually are even more strict about these things, and then we'll all be in trouble. But we don't know. Anyway, thanks for that question. That's a serious question, and I think about it all the time. I ask my Zen teachers and my rabbis what they think about it, always, yeah. Well, let's have lunch and take a break, and maybe I don't know. No, you can assess. Maybe there are further hands up. So what we could do is we could go. Yeah, I see Donna's hand is up and Holly's hand is up. We could, and then Eden has a physical hand up. Maybe what we could do is come back at 1 o'clock and do a brief sit, maybe 10 minutes, and then start out with the leftover questions that are there now. And then after addressing that, we can go on and say a few more things and then have more time for discussion. Okay, let's do that.
Sounds good, Norman. Thank you.
Everybody have a very.
So we'll be back in 1 hour at 2 o'clock Mountain, 1 o'clock Pacific.
Okay, thanks.